Execution day at Goulburn Correctional Centre. The final moments. There's a particular quiet that exists only in places designed to hold people still. Not silence exactly, more like restraint pressed into the air. Here, nothing appears to be happening. And yet, everything already has. Goulburn Correctional Centre was built to last longer than memory. Its walls were not designed for urgency or emotion. They were designed for endurance. Inside, time does not move forward in the way it does elsewhere. It compresses. Days resemble each other so closely that men begin to measure life in routines rather than dates. Execution day does not announce itself loudly. There are no sirens, no sudden movements. The difference is subtle, felt more than seen. A tightening of procedure, a narrowing of conversation, a sense that something ordinary is being carried out with extraordinary finality. Routine is the first thing prison takes seriously. It is also the first thing it uses to make the unimaginable feel manageable. On execution days, the routine does not change. That is the point. Breakfast is served at the same time. Doors are unlocked and locked with the same motion. Paperwork is completed with the same handwriting. For staff, routine becomes insulation. For the condemned, it becomes a countdown that never names itself. No one says, "This is the last morning." The absence of that sentence carries its own weight. Waiting is not passive here. It is an active state of being. Men learn to wait for doors, for meals, for permission to speak, for sound. But execution introduces a different kind of waiting, one that has an endpoint, yet refuses to reveal when the mind will truly accept it. Some prisoners fill the time with structure, counting steps, repeating prayers, rehearsing conversations that will never happen. Others let the mind drift, not forward, but backward toward moments where choice still felt real. Fear does not arrive suddenly. It settles, quietly, like dust. Prison reshapes identity long before it threatens life. Names become numbers. Histories are reduced to files. By the time execution approaches, many men have already practiced disappearing. Not physically, psychologically. They speak less. They correct others less. They stop insisting on how they are remembered. The most unsettling thing is not panic. It is compliance. When identity has been worn down slowly enough, the final instruction can feel like just another rule to follow. Execution does not belong to one person. It spreads outward. Officers learn early not to personalize the work. Distance becomes a professional skill. But distance does not erase presence. It only delays recognition. Years later, many remember not the act, but the waiting beforehand. The stillness. The sound of their own breathing in a hallway meant for control. No training prepares someone for the knowledge that routine can be lethal. The final hours are not dramatic. They are procedural. Every movement is accounted for. Every pause measured. There is no room for doubt here. Only execution of design. And yet, within this precision, something human persists. A hesitation in the voice. A glance held half a second longer than necessary. Small deviations that will never be written down. Afterward, the prison continues. That is its greatest skill. Another man will sleep in the same space. Another routine will fill the hours. But something remains altered. Not visibly, not immediately. Damage in places like this does not announce itself. It accumulates quietly, irreversibly. Execution day ends without ceremony. No marker remains. Yet the impact extends far beyond the moment it concludes. It lives in how people learn to endure, in what they stop expecting, and in the understanding, rarely spoken, that the most profound consequences of this place are not found in what it takes, but in what it leaves behind.
The hours after an execution are often mistaken for closure. In reality, they are an extension. Sound returns slowly. Not noise, just the permission for it. Men speak again, but with restraint. As if volume itself might be disrespectful. As if the walls are still listening. Silence here is not empty. It is occupied by what has just occurred, and by what cannot be undone. Normalization is not forgetting. It is accommodation. By the next morning, routine resumes with remarkable efficiency. Schedules realign. Forms are filed. This is how institutions survive acts that would break individuals. For prisoners, normalization carries a different cost. It teaches them that even death can be absorbed, processed, filed away. When fear becomes ordinary, it loses its urgency, but never its influence. Something changes inside people after an execution, even those who were not directly involved. The shift is subtle, a recalibration of what feels possible. Men adjust their expectations downward, not consciously, instinctively. Hope becomes conditional. Plans become theoretical. The presence of finality alters how patience is practiced, how time is endured, how identity is protected or abandoned. There is no official record of how execution days linger, no form to capture the emotional residue. Memory here does not live in archives. It lives in behavior, in the way conversations shorten, in the way jokes stop halfway through, in the way some men never again sit with their backs to a door. These are not reactions. They are adaptations. Authority in places like this is rarely loud. It is quiet, consistent, and absolute. Execution reinforces that authority without needing to restate it. It reminds everyone, staff and prisoners alike, where control ultimately resides. Distance becomes essential, not just between people, but between actions and reflection. To think too deeply is to risk collapse. So thinking is rationed. After an execution, time behaves differently. The future feels thinner. The past feels heavier. Men begin to live in narrower windows. Today, this hour, this moment. Long-term thinking becomes a liability. Endurance replaces ambition. Survival becomes the only narrative that feels honest. From the outside, nothing appears different. The building remains intact. The system functions. But inside, something has been permanently altered. Execution does not simply end a life. It reshapes the psychological landscape of everyone it touches. The consequences are cumulative, layered, invisible to those who do not live within the walls. Places like Goulburn do not demand that people understand them, only that they adapt. Execution Day is not remembered for what happened. It is remembered for what followed, for the way patience was redefined, for the way silence deepened, for the way endurance became instinct rather than choice. And perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: the damage does not stop when the day ends. It continues quietly, in every routine that follows. In places like this, survival is not always about resistance. Often it is about reduction. Men learn which parts of themselves attract attention, and which parts can be safely erased. Opinions soften, reactions dull. The self becomes smaller, quieter, easier to manage. Execution accelerates this process. It teaches that permanence is fragile, and visibility can be dangerous. Disappearance here is not physical. It is psychological. And once learned, it is difficult to reverse. Emotion becomes a resource, carefully spent, rarely replenished. Grief is rationed. Anger is delayed. Empathy is negotiated quietly, often without words. After an execution, emotional restraint tightens, not because people feel less, but because feeling too much becomes exhausting. This is how endurance is maintained, not by strength, but by conservation. Even when the mind adapts, the body resists forgetting. Sleep fractures. Muscles tense without instruction. Breathing adjusts to spaces long before danger appears. Execution imprints itself physically, in posture, in reflex. The body learns what the environment demands and prepares accordingly every day that follows. Stories once shared begin to stall. Men stop talking about who they were, then about who they might become. Execution reinforces the risk of narrative. It reminds everyone that stories can end abruptly, and, without resolution, silence becomes safer than memory. Forgetting becomes functional. Those who remain carry execution forward in subtle ways. They become quieter mentors, cautious observers, living reminders that the system does not rush. But it does not forget. Time here teaches a specific lesson. That permanence belongs to the institution, not the individual. Outside, life continues uninterrupted. Most people never feel the echo of execution days. They exist beyond daily awareness, absorbed into statistics, headlines, history. But the distance is deceptive. What happens inside these walls does not stay contained. It shapes how people return, how they relate, how they trust or fail to. The deepest consequences of execution are not immediate. They unfold slowly, across years, relationships, generations. They appear in restraint mistaken for calm, in silence mistaken for peace. Damage of this kind does not announce itself. It integrates. There is no metric for what is lost here. No chart for diminished expectation. No record of erased selves. The system accounts for outcomes, not aftermath. And so the most significant effects remain undocumented, felt only by those who carry them. Execution day appears contained, scheduled, concluded, but its true reach is neither brief nor visible. It teaches people how to wait, how to endure, how to disappear without leaving. And long after the day is over, long after the routine resumes, what remains is not closure, but a silence that knows exactly what it has survived. Moral fatigue does not arrive as conflict. It arrives as efficiency. Questions that once felt heavy begin to feel impractical. Reflection becomes optional. Distance becomes policy. Over time, the difference between can and should blurs. Not because people stop caring, but because caring becomes unsustainable at scale. The system does not demand cruelty, only consistency. And consistency, repeated long enough, reshapes conscience. The reach of execution extends into homes far from the walls. Partners learn not to ask about work. Children learn to recognize silence as fatigue. Details are withheld, not out of secrecy, but out of protection. Yet absence has its own language. It teaches restraint. It teaches emotional economy. What is learned at the prison does not stay there. For those who leave, temporarily or permanently, ordinary life can feel exaggerated, too loud, too fast, too open. Choice becomes unfamiliar. Freedom feels unstructured, almost irresponsible. Execution days do not end at the gate. They recalibrate how reality is processed. The architecture itself teaches lessons. It teaches patience through delay, compliance through repetition, endurance through enclosure. Execution does not disrupt this design. It completes it. The environment reminds everyone. The building will remain, long after the individuals do not. Language adjusts to accommodate finality. Words soften what actions finalize. Terms become technical, precise, distant. This is not deception. It is survival. Language becomes a buffer, a way to move forward, without fully arriving. What remains unrecorded matters most. The pauses, the hesitations, the moments where someone almost speaks and decides not to. These absences accumulate. They form the real archive of the place. Years pass. Personnel change. Policies evolve. But the shape of the experience remains consistent. Execution day becomes one of many memories, not isolated, but integrated. The institution does not remember. People do. The most enduring effect of this place is not fear, nor punishment, nor even loss. It is adaptation, the quiet agreement to live within limits. Once thought unimaginable, execution day is only one moment, but what it teaches is carried forward day after day, in ways too ordinary to notice, and too deep to undo. In places like this, endings are rarely decisive. They do not arrive with resolution. They arrive with continuation. Execution day does not stand apart in memory. It blends into routine, into habit, into expectation. Its influence is felt not in shock, but in how easily the world resumes. What endures here is not the act itself, but the quiet knowledge it leaves behind. That finality can be scheduled, that absence can be normalized, that people can learn to live beside irreversible loss. Without naming it, the walls remain, the routines return, the silence adapts. And long after the moment has passed, long after the day is over, what persists is not what was taken, but what was slowly, permanently changed.